Jasmine and I just got done teaching a class. Jasmine talked about how to protest your property taxes. When the city assesses your property value and then taxes you according to that property value, you can apparently protest that. I had no idea how the process worked. Jasmine has actually done it herself and shared her story about how she protested her own property taxes. And the city ended up just calling her and saying, if we keep it the same as last year, will you get rid of your protest?
I'm like, heck yes.
She said, yeah. And then her property taxes didn't go up.
What we did here today was with Wesley Rankin. It's a nonprofit, so the focus was residential, right? So homeowners, a little bit of landlord. But I've done, the property protest, I've done it both on residential for homes that, of course, that I own, that I live in, also ones that I rent out, and then also for commercial. And what we actually didn't cover today, you may already be familiar, but what we didn't cover today is that for residential, it's usually based off of comps, and that's where you have to dive into those comps, and sometimes they'll just settle out. But then for commercial, you can actually just use the income approach. So usually, you can protest and just say, you know what, my property is vacant, or my property, the people don't pay that much money. So it's actually not worth anything, even if you have all of these comps. It doesn't matter, my property is lower valued, and that works really well as well.
So this is the eviction process in Texas that I was speaking on today. And it just so happened, it segued perfectly. One of the audience members, she had a question because she had a tenant who had a 3-year lease. The lease expired, and then the tenant decided he wasn't going to move out. So she was wondering how to get him out, if she even had the right to get him out, which of course she does. And not only was he holding over beyond the lease, but he wasn't paying rent in addition to that. So we walked through the eviction process today. And then it just comes with experience too. There's certain JP judges, and JP stands for Justice of the Peace. There's certain judges that like things done a certain way. And so luckily the district that this woman was in, I know the judge is super chill, and so when she goes to fight this eviction, she's not going to have a lot of trouble, especially if the tenant doesn't show up. The judge is just going to grant her possession, likely without her having to show any documentation or anything like that, because it'll already be in her filing with the court. But then there's other judges who definitely want to hear your story, why you're evicting them. They want to see every piece of paper. They want to see all your documentation as to why you're evicting the tenant, especially if you're asking for payment from the tenant in back rent or attorney's fees or filing fees or anything along those lines. So even if you know the process, just having the experience of knowing how these judges operate can sometimes come in handy. Yeah, the other helpful thing too is that a lot of these court websites will have forms. So they'll have a form for you to send out or for you to file with the court to file your eviction. They'll have a form to file your writ of petition. So all you have to do is fill in the blanks, which makes it a lot easier.
You can hire a property tax firm, and a lot of people do just so that they don't have to think about it or do it, but it's a pretty simple process. And the counties and the cities get so many applications that a lot of times they're just trying to get these things off their plate. So it's helpful if you know how your area operates, but at the same time, they usually do make it pretty easy for you to just do it yourself.
Yeah, if you're trying to figure out whether to hire an attorney in your tax situation, or if you have an issue with a landlord-tenant dispute, and you're trying to figure out, oh, should I hire an attorney? Should I handle it myself? At least on the eviction side, if it's just a general, similar to the situation I just described where the tenant was holding over, he wasn't paying rent, in that situation, you can usually do it yourself. If it gets sticky and the lease hasn't expired, there's certain technical violations, if it's not just a clear non-payment of rent, sometimes it's worth it to hire an attorney. The other time is if the tenant is fighting it tooth and nail, then usually it's a good idea to hire an attorney in those situations, because then the tenant can't try to skirt the eviction on a technicality because you technically didn't do something pursuant to the law. You didn't write the notice and include all the requirements in the notice. The other time is if you're a property owner and you own multiple properties and you're having to deal with multiple evictions, at that point your time is going to be more valuable than having to deal with these evictions. So hire an attorney who is used to doing these things, knows what the process is, this is routine for them. At that point your time is much more valuable than having to go to court and explain why you're evicting your tenant.
So a property manager guided with the right resources from an attorney.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. So those are situations in which it's usually good to hire an attorney. But if you're a single property owner, or you only own 2 properties, you're renting out one of them's your homestead and you live in it yourself, and the tenant's just not paying rent, then at that point, you can certainly do it yourself.